author, activist, distinguished professor emerita at University of California, Santa Cruz, author of many books, including a new updated edition of her autobiography, Angela Davis. Tonight, at the Audubon Ballroom, which is now the Shabazz Center. DemocracyNow.org will be linking to that YouTube stream. Ben Crump will also be speaking. I will be saying a few words, and Malcolm X's daughter will be introducing and giving a keynote as well, Dr. Ilyasa Shabazz. So go to DemocracyNow.org for the details. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them and are not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
Hey, Al, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. I am wondering if anyone can hear me. Can you hear me? You can hear me. We cannot hear you. So, hello, everyone. Sometimes this happens. Great. So, Al, we still cannot hear you. Do you want to try to unplug your microphone and plug it back in? Because we have such an amazing show with the fabulous guests that we have. I want to make sure that everyone can get all of this great information and all this great task. So why don't we do this? Why don't we go ahead and go back to station, have them play some music for a moment, and then we will come back with this fabulous episode of the Conversation with Al McFarlane. But we're still live streaming, so that means that there is our viewing audience who can still hear us. So I do not know what to say. Why don't you go out of the studio, Al, and come back in? And in the meantime, I will make sure that everyone knows that the best way that they can support us is to go to YouTube. We are trying to expand our subscribers on YouTube. We have about 300 now. We may have a little bit more than that because you all have been so incredibly gracious by going to YouTube/@insightnews.mn and hitting that subscribe button and actually hitting that bell so you are made aware each and every time we upload a video or we upload anything that is going to bring new content to you, our viewer.
How about now? Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. I don't know what happened, but it's good that you're here. I've been telling everybody that the best way to support us is to go to our YouTube channel at Insight News MN and hit the subscribe button and the bell, because that will help us get to a place where we can actually start to do some really amazing stuff, not only for them, but for the community.
Vosh, thank you. And let me double check with the station to make sure that we are getting the signal out. So station, let us know.
Yeah, you don't worry about any of that. I will take care of all of that.
You got it.
You focus on making sure that you have the best possible show from this moment forward. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Al McFarlane.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let me take a minute to introduce you, Vosh. Vosh Bodhi is one of the executive producers for the conversation, and a genius that he is. He solves problems and makes it all work. So Vosh, thank you so much. Well, once again, Al McFarlane here. You're listening to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm so glad to be with you. And I was saying to myself, apparently, that I just adore the fact that our show follows the formidable Amy Goodman. She does such great work in the world, and I appreciate her. I think I join all of you who are listeners here on KFAI, really solidly appreciating her visionary, I say revolutionary work. She is a fierce and tireless advocate for democracy, for freedom, for recognizing and supporting dignity of human beings over the planet. So kudos to Amy Goodman and kudos to KFAI. What a wonderful place and space to be in. Well, we've got a great show today. And the main topic today, I'll be bringing in my friends from the Cuban Film Festival to talk about that. Before I do that, I want to do a couple of things that we have been adding recently called the Hot Topics. And one of them involves a community and its need for emergency rental assistance in the Brooklyn Park area. I'm looking at an article on the Insight News website. It's an article by Insight News reporter Vanessa Muthama. And the article is headlined, ACER, ACER, seeks legislative fast track for emergency rental assistance. And she says, call legislative leadership, fast track emergency rental assistance, close quote. This was ACER's statement to Minnesota residents as a result of the proposed legislation aiming at preventing housing displacements in the community. The article said, unfortunately, there's no bill yet, despite lawmakers and Minnesota Housing expressing their interest in fast-tracking emergency rental assistance. Lawmakers must do everything to ensure no family is displaced and unhoused, especially in the colder winter months, said the ACER organization. But what does this actually mean? And who is ACER? How are they continuing the fight to support that efforts that families have at staying housed? Well, go to insightnews.com and you'll see a story about the background of this organization. ACER, it stands for African Career Education and Resources, Inc. It's a non-governmental organization that provides community services in Brooklyn Park. And the main focus is Africans in the diaspora, particularly West African immigrants. Their mission statement says it all. They want to build power to achieve systemic change that advances racial and economic equity for our communities. Well, that's hot topic number one. Hot topic number two is also about a legislative issue, legislative concerns, and that features an article on State Senator Bobby Joe Champion. The article says, and it's an article from Axios Twin Cities website. It says Senator calls for more investments as Aldi's and Walgreens leave North Minneapolis. The article reads, a top Minnesota legislator representing North Minneapolis says state and local lawmakers should do whatever they can do to attract and retain businesses to the neighborhood following the high-profile departures of two large retailers. Why it matters? Well, news that Aldi and Walgreens are closing their North Side locations, sparked concerns about access to grocery stores and pharmacies for area residents. Senator Bobby Joe Champion, who chairs the Senate Jobs and Economic Development Committee, told reporters last week that he's exploring funding or other incentives that the legislature might be able to pass. He says they want to press the city, who is talking to those businesses and trying to get a better sense as to what happened, what was part of their decision making, to see if there's anything that the state could do. In the meantime, the Champion said the city has got to make some necessary investments to make sure that we are growing businesses in the area, not losing them. Well, those are our hot topics today. And again, you can often find them right here on InsideNews.com. I want to begin today's program with a special brief interview with a person whose dad I knew but didn't know personally. And the news is not happy news, it's sad news, but it's important news. Let me introduce Denzel Epps. Denzel Epps called me just recently to let me know that his dad had passed. And we're showing on the screen, for those who are watching us on social media, if you're on radio, you have to use your mind's eye. We're looking at a cover of Inside News from February 2020, and the cover has a wonderful, beautiful, striking photograph of Chef Belvin Hill. Chef Belvin Hill was part of the phenomenal opening of the French Hen restaurant in St. Paul. And I can tell you that he cut a striking figure in a Jamaican style, Rasta style, in a community, creating a place where healthy food was available, where friendship was available, where people were welcome. Well, Denzel, good afternoon, brother. My condolences again. And I wanted to take a minute to ask you to talk a little bit about your dad, about Belvin Hill, and also to take a minute to let people know that your family has created a GoFundMe initiative to support whatever transitions you all have to make. So good afternoon and welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane.
Thank you all, man. I appreciate you, Al, and this opportunity to get to talk about, my father's hospitality and experience via, South Carolina, all the way up through Mississippi, and lastly through Chicago, and then planted the seeds here in Minnesota. So I'm very excited. But I want to just open it up with a quick prayer, I think that's relevant, and I'll make it real quick here for us during this time. Father, we just thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to get to speak on my father's behalf. And we ask that you lead, guide us, protect us, Lord, through the wilderness, Lord. And we ask that there's all great things that have come out of people who want to do the right thing and when they have a will. Thank you, Lord. Amen. I try to always start it off with a good, feel when God's present. But basically, I just want to, let the world know that we lost a real big soldier, a friend, and most of all, my father. So, yeah.
So talk about his work over at the French Hen. What was he doing there, and what was his style? And you're in the cooking business too, aren't you? Or studying it, or tell me about that.
Yeah. So basically, just a little bit about me first. I kind of grew up under my dad working at Keys Cafe. He also helped shape the restaurant hospitality over there with Carol. But some sisters owned, family owned here locally. I'm sure you all probably heard about them. Or the restaurant industry is downtown St. Paul, Minneapolis, Roseville. They got a few of them around the Twin Cities here. But basically, we grew up working for my dad, calling us in the kitchen to help him out. And I pretty much started my customer service in the restaurant hospitality. And then I transitioned that into face-to-face sales. So within the last decade here, I've been working with pro athletes and coaches on contract and negotiating. So now I'm at the University of Houston, finishing up with my master's degree there, and to jump into the industry of helping athletes. But as far as the customer service side in the hospitality industry, I pretty much grew up, all of us is 8 siblings in total. So we got 6 boys and 2 girls. And my dad is pretty much, helped us throughout the industry. And
What was his training, and how did he become a chef?
Yeah, so basically we traced that through my auntie, Miss Louise Hill. She is from Chicago, South Side, owned a building in Inglewood particularly. And then my dad also grew up, that's on his mom's side. And then most importantly, more recently, throughout the last couple of decades, he was raised with Carolyn Fell. So that's on his dad's side, which is where that Jamaican / Haitian side come from. And we pretty much grew up. He grew up around his first cousins, Constance Taylor Hill, Constance Fells. She's a very good, very close first cousin of my father's, and she pretty much helped raise him outside of my grandma. So he pretty much learned from both sides, his mom's side and his dad's side. So he pretty much brought that here to Minnesota.
What do you think he wants his legacy to be as a chef? What energy, what vibration was he sharing with customers through his cooking, through his culinary genius?
Just really taking all, notations and not, no big eyes, no little U's. Everybody can learn something. My dad picked up from everybody. And basically, he wanted to, infrastructure that into his cooking, the taste, the feel, creating a different culture so people can cultivate into the food. Food has its own culture outside of people. So my dad wanted to push that through his legacy of the food, of the taste and the smell.
Listen, you told me that you guys have a GoFundMe. Let's let people know what that is. And if people want to support the family in this moment of transition, as your dad is transformed into the realm of the ancestors, let's let people know how to connect and support.
Yeah, the GoFundMe link, I do believe I submitted it to Vash. He should be able to provide that in the link somewhere, but it is a GoFundMe link under, I believe it's under my name, Denzel Epps, so they can search it under that. And if anyone got any questions, they can call me as well. I'm, not hard to find. If there's any questions, I can be reached on Facebook as well at Don, that's DON / Be Great. So that's BEGREAT. You should see a picture with me with my cap and gown on. And then also, I believe there's a link there if you all can go to the GoFundMe link, and it's it's an ID number 08970E1C as in Charlie. So that's GoFundMe with a slash link of 0897E1C. Right now we are kind of struggling financially. My dad didn't have life insurance, so we are trying to create some funds here so we can go ahead and have a proper burial for our father.
Denzel, I'm sure our community is going to respond. Thank you very much. And again, condolences to you. But I also join the community in celebrating the memory, the work, the mission, the passion that your dad brought to loving his work and loving his family and loving the community as well. Brother, thank you. Thank you so much. And you take care, okay? Regards to all of the family.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. God bless you all. Stay safe.
All right. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I want to pivot now to the next and the balance of the program. Two good friends of mine are here. Franklin Curbelo is here, and also Frank, let's see, let me move my camera up here, is Greg Clave. Greg Clave is here. Franklin and Greg have been involved with the Cuban Film Festival forever. So what is the Cuban Film Festival? Let me tell you about that. Just a second here. I'll pull my notes up. And well, before I do, we've got a trailer. And so you'll be able to hear it on the radio, but if you're online with us at Facebook or YouTube, you'll be able to see it. Let's watch the trailer on the Cuban Film Festival.
Cuchara, cucharita, cucharón. Ven,
Well, that was a perfect trailer because it works perfectly for radio audiences, but the extra bonus is those who are watching on the digital media platforms got to see some wonderful artwork as well. Greg Clavey, Franklin Curbelo, buenas tardes, caballeros, ¿cómo están ustedes? Bienvenidos
Buenas tardes,
a este
Al.
programa. ¿Cómo están?
Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you for having us on your show, Al.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for being here. Let me just read a little bit about the history. This is the 14th Minnesota Cuban Film Festival that takes place from March 1 through April 5th. Again, supported by the Minneapolis-St. Paul MSP Film Society. It's going to be at Main Theater in Minneapolis. And since 2010, the Minnesota Cuba Film Festival, MCFF, has brought to our land of 10,000 lakes some of the best Cuban films. This year's festival takes place as part of the MSP Film Festival at Main Theater, 6 consecutive Wednesdays, March 1 through April 5th. The Cuban Film Festival features films that address the achievements and challenges of the Cuban people through the eyes of the filmmakers. The festival highlights diverse and challenging films of social change, of human struggle, and the boldness of the human spirit. And the objective of the Minnesota Cuba Committee, the presenter of the film festival, remains to offer Minnesotans a chance to learn about and appreciate Cuban films and culture, and to remind our supporters of the onerous burden that the blockade inflicts on the Cuban people. In spite of ongoing economic challenges and the U.S. blockade, Cuba shows the way forward with medical research, environmental sustainability, and the new progressive family code. That's great background. Greg, talk about you and Franklin and others coming up with the mission and the what really motivated you. I mean, you said it here, but say it in your words, why this is so important to do.
First of all, I want to point out the music that was the background for the trailer. The music was from Charanga Tropical, which is a local band. In fact, they just played at the Dakota last night, and you can see them at various venues throughout the Minneapolis area. They're a fantastic band. We have one of the most vibrant Cuban band environments in the United States. And it's that culture, that vibrancy of the Cuban culture, that I believed would attract people to learn more about Cuba. Because once you hear it, once you see their art, once you see their film, you can see that these people are on a path to a better world. And so that's what got me going to Cuba in 2010 on a license to study with the Cuban Film Institute. And I brought back Cuban films and started it in 2010. I think that Cuba resembles a bond between the African diaspora of the United States as well as the rest of the Americas in creating a culture that enriches our lives in many ways. And if given the resources to continue their path, that they would lead us toward better futures for healthcare, education, environmental protection, etc. So I think another reason is the bond that's been created between the African diaspora of the United States and the African diaspora of Cuba, but also includes the progressive politics of America too, in supporting people seeking liberation, democracy, and freedom, contrary to what U.S. media of the status quo of the corporate U.S. media would tell us.
Franklin, jump in, add to that. Why is it important that we try to lift up the genius of Cuban filmmaking and creativity and art in ways to show the pathway to all of us becoming better human beings?
Right. I just want to add that, besides besides the Cuban committee and the Film Society, we have the invaluable help for so many years of the Cuban Film Institute. Without them, it would have been difficult for us to have access to the latest releases, from Cuba, and give us, a great, support from them, and we are very appreciative. And that kind of show you the level of solidarity that Cuba show not just to us but to the world. They're open, there are solidarity in terms of ideas, solidarity in terms, when there's a disaster and the far ends of the world, there is, a Cuban team of doctors going there to help. Where there is a need, but because of the embargo, and not be able to have, the components to be able, to provide healthcare to the community, to the population. Cuba, but have, the ability to create their own vaccines. Cuba is able, to be able to come out with, with the, drugs that they are not allowed here in the United States that they could save a lot of lives, especially, about the diabetes and, the lung cancer. That shows you, how important it is that, that the ability, how important it is that the American people and the Cuban people, which, by the way, we are all in the same family. It's not the backyard. We're just, but better or worse, we are, but tied together. And the better, the more that we understand each other, the less fear, Americans will feel about Cuba. So Cuba loves baseball. Cuba loves jazz. Cuba, is about America. But so despite, what people say that they are, Cuba is us, and we carry Cuba, but for many centuries in our heart. Many years ago, there was a pageant in St. Paul celebrating, but the end of that, the Cuba, the Spain war. So there was a big celebration on the west side, and they were celebrating, but some children were named after, a great, but general, and the Cuban, but the fight against Spain, Maceo. A lot of people call it Maceo, but it was remembering. It was a whole week of all kinds of activities. If you, the Minnesota Historical Society have a great background in that pageant. I wish, but a lot of African Americans will remember, but 100 years ago, have, but they're respectable and have, but they being able to identify, but the struggle of, the Cuban people for independence from Spain. So that's kind of my take, but why it's important, to tighten around because, we are family. But this is what I feel. That's the word that I use most often, and the solidarity is what they bind us together.
Walk us through some of the titles of the films that will be being presented during the festival. I think sort of go through them one by one, maybe, and let people know what's going to be happening. Both of you guys can do that.
Yeah, we have an interesting, but it's always a challenge to find. There are only 6 films that we feature in our festivals, but it's always a challenge to find a nice balance of about the a documentary feature. This year we have about achieved to be able to have 3 feature films and 3 documentaries. One that is open on March 1st on Wednesday is Cuento, excuse me, Cuento de un Día Más, Tales of One More Day. What is unique about this is it takes place in the context of the COVID-19, how Cuba was able, to deal with that and how people, were able, to navigate, but in how people, relate to that. So Cuento de un Día Más, there are 6 stories by 6 different teams, by 6 directors. And the overall direction, another, a renowned, but the film director called Fernando Perez. And all this, the young filmmakers are part of the future of filmmaking in Cuba. So that was very important, about this film, because it gives us, an understanding how much talent, those individuals have, but they are bursting at the seam. They want, to show to the world that this is Cuento de un Día Más. But
Okay.
the one, on March 8th, this is a very rare, rare, but view of something that is very little known outside Cuba. It's about the religion and the society called the Abaca Society. And this is something that, came, with the slaves. It has the roots, in Nigeria and in West Africa, but it took root, but in Cuba around, I'd say, about 150 years ago. History is called, but known generally as Ekpe, Egbo, Nave, or Ube, among the multilingual group in the region. It was believed that Ñañigos, as the members are known, could be transformed into leopards to stalk their enemies. So this gives you an understanding, but they have, but those traditions still live on and they're very strong, in Cuba. By the way, this Abaca religion and society is the only country in the world that still have, that tradition. So
Okay.
I think it's going to be a treat. Then we're going to move into a lighter, about the fair, and March 15 called Havana Selfie. Havana Selfie was, about the success story, about, the life, about the people. It was a film, but they commemorate the 500 years, 500th anniversary of the foundation of Havana. So the director Santana was able, to go to different neighborhoods, telling different stories to give you a sense, about how people, what they are, but living, but they, in those days. And then there's something very special, especially perhaps, about Greg can talk about it, is about, how the efforts that Cuba is doing to preserve the natural habitat, especially the coral reef. They're doing, they have, a program called Tarea Vida, which is a very multifaceted, about the approach. And, the director of the film, the producer, Dr. Jaffe from Glasgow, Scotland, went to Cuba to document the efforts that then talk to the people that actually implementing, about the plan. So, Greg, Greg, can you talk a little bit more about, that, about, what Cuba is doing, to what regarding the environment?
And before you do, let me remind people, this is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm Al McFarlane. My guests are Franklin Curbelo, you just heard him, and Greg Clavey, you'll hear in a second. And we're talking about the Minnesota Cuban Film Festival. Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the features of the film festival that I had thought of in the beginning was after each film, people need to sit down and talk about the film and have discussion about the content, because so many times you see inspirational films and you don't really have anybody to share the impact of that film with you at the moment. And so that's one of our features, is that after each film, we have panel discussions with people who know the issues that the film has brought up. And we're able to talk about how people saw the film, how it impacted them, how they relate to it. And so Life's Project, Tierra Vida, is primarily about how Cuba is trying to combat the changes that are going on in the environment, such as the rising of the ocean level with the melting of the ice caps that is threatening their coastal sea towns. Of course, Cuba has a large border facing the oceans with fishing villages and towns, especially such as Havana, which is right on the ocean, that they will need to protect or actually move inland. But it not only goes there, but it also goes on to protecting water resources. How do they grow crops? How do they reforest their areas so that they're able to have that kind of environment that continues to be good habitat for the animals and birds that live there and migrate there during the winter, that make that a special place. It's extraordinary. There are so many species that live only in Cuba and nowhere else in the world. And Cuba is trying to totally convert to sustainable energy because the blockade has kept them from being able to use energy that would be provided by oil in thermal plants, etc. And so they're trying to do these projects without the ability to have investment or funding come in from other countries around the world because the blockade is so severe. I just want to say one thing about Havana Selfies is anybody who's been to Havana knows it's a magical city. It's one of the most often revisited cities. It's one of the cities that when tourists go there, they want to return a second time, a third time, a fourth time, because it's so magical. Havana Selfies is a tribute to Havana. So to see it, you see some of the magic of Havana and how people continue to live with all the films, how people continue to live and have productive lives, even without material goods, even in the challenges of deprivation, and even with outreaches, even to sometimes have an adequate diet. The blockade is that severe. It reminds me of the Black communities in the United States during Reconstruction, when we ended slavery and had a great revolution that was supposed to turn the tide of our country, and Black communities and Black people began to prosper in the economy, and it was under attack from white supremacists. I liken Cuba, United States blockade of Cuba, very similar to the white supremacy attack on Black communities that even exists today.
That's interesting. I want to go into that. Two films you haven't mentioned so far. The last two are Vincenta B, which is a drama. And you also haven't spent time with, give some information on the last one, Nino Rivera, Cuerdas de Oro, Golden Strings, another documentary. What about those two films?
Right. So Vicenta B is, the director is a well-known director, very accomplished, Carlos Lechuga, and it tells, the story about Respecte Santera in Havana, who has the gift of clairvoyance. The films, about from one side of the world, however, tend to gravitate and set light. Let me see. While her business thrives, she hopes her son continues the family tradition of helping others. That's her desire. But he decides, to emigrate, and Vicenta finds herself in a crisis of faith and loses her gifts. She finds herself questioning her life, but also unable to understand why she has been left alone in a country where everyone seems to have lost their faith. So there is a parallel about, the migration. There's a lot of sons and husbands have left, sons, but that leaves their mothers behind. So this is an interesting study. You can, but read between the lines. But, but what I want to highlight is, about the role, with, about the main character. She is practically in every frame, and she does a wonderful job. I really highly recommend for people to go and see Vicenta Bay, because it's going to bring some tears to your eyes and understanding about the role of Santeras in Havana. Now, moving on to the last two, the feature that, even though it's an animation feature, it's a musical called Chico and Rita. This, Chico and Rita, won a lot of awards for the originality and for the accomplishment and the techniques. And it's a love story about, a Cuban singer in the 1940s and Chico, pianist. And they both struggle. And then Rita is, lured to New York, and leave, Chico behind. They are madly in love. And then, but life, has rather tumbles. And then, in the end, there is, the reencounter. It's a beautiful, beautiful done. And also great, soundtracks. They are great musicians, jazz musicians. Now, to close, about the selection of the films, we have a local the singer, Cuban singer called Gloria Rivera, who sings, with a local band, Salsa del Sol, and she's been here for a number of years. But her father was another influential musician that played the tres. It's a kind of a Cuban instrument, but it was an arranger. It was, a composer. It's called Nino Rivera. That's why Gloria Rivera is also known as Gloria La Niña Rivera. So it's an interesting, about the study of the period in the 40s and 50s and 60s. They have, about Cuba, most everybody too, but they export, but great, music and genres. Even, I don't know if you're familiar with, the genre feeling, and that's something is the Cuban, about the interpretation of, blues. But it was, so that's going to be quite a treat. Gloria is going to be present that they're showing, that documentary. I might even, sing one of her father's famous tune called Jamaiquino, the Jamaican one. So we are looking forward to that, closing with a lot of music, and also to have honor the life and the artistry of Nino Rivera, for his being, but very humble, but very, very talented individual, very influential to a lot of musicians, from that time.
Let me do this, ask you a couple of questions about the Cuban community here in Minnesota. What would you say is the size of the Cuban community? I think Cubans know themselves, but in general, there's not an appreciation of the Cuban-ness of elements of our community. That's what I think. I could be wrong. What do you guys say? That's question number one. And I want to have that lead to question number two. And that is the question, Greg, that you've discovered or discussed a little bit about the relationship between the Africanity, the African diaspora that Cuba, in a sense, is the center of, and it binds the other descendants of the African slave trade, descendants of Africa, not only in the U.S. and the Caribbean, but also throughout the Americas. And it seems to me that awareness of that common bond, common experience, and the potential to articulate a common rediscovery, maybe rebirth across the continent and across the world is at hand right now. So talk about that. How does the Cuban community see itself, and how is it seen in Minnesota? And then talk about the question of Africa, Cuba.
Yeah, recent census has put the population of Cubans who have migrated to Minnesota from Cuba for somewhere between 250 and 300 in the population. So it's relatively small. It's spread out throughout Minnesota. Its impact is mostly felt in the areas of music, art, healthcare. Cuba has, of course, been on the forefront of healthcare for many decades, especially after the development of, their belief that healthcare is a universal right. That is written in their constitution. So it's free for everybody in Cuba. And when you go down there, you don't have to deal with any insurance agency. You just go to a clinic and a hospital and you get treated. And they provide healthcare with mortality rates that are much lower than the United States, life expectancy that's much higher than the United States itself, and infant and maternal mortality rates that are way lower than the United States. And so people from the United States who have went to Cuba to see the healthcare system and study it have come back impressed, so much that when Cuban doctors do immigrate to the United States, they have come to Minnesota here. And the University of Minnesota has now a memorandum of understanding to collaborate on healthcare.
I think we lost, there we go, yeah.
Yeah, this was just signed last year, this memorandum of understanding. So that's how Cuba has impacted Minnesota, and Minnesota has impacted Cuba. As well as in the areas, we have such a rich artistic community in the areas of dance and music, because Minnesotans who have went to Cuba, because of their fame in those areas, have studied and become so impressed that they've taken on the study of that culture and then have integrated it in their own dance and music. So the connection is not only of the African diaspora, but it's also a human connection that bonds us. Again, that focus on solidarity, that we have to see ourselves as one family. We can't be divided by political issues and political boundaries. Well,
but you mentioned, you mentioned, Greg, the sense that the blockade against Cuba is reminding you of that period after Reconstruction when white supremacy through Jim Crow and the Klan really unleashed a horrific crime against humanity in its treatment, in effect, re-enslavement of African people by denying them opportunity, denying their humanity, and creating laws and structures that permanently depressed and suppressed opportunity for Black people. The same exists there. So the question to me is a question about the question of the presence of African people throughout the hemisphere. And the important thing, Franklin, is that I have often said that as a person of African descent in the United States, our culture has us look inward, and we somehow think that, you know, we are the only victims of the transatlantic slave trade, of the movement of the colonizer culture out of Europe. But the fact of the matter is that there are more of us who are African in Brazil, for example, than anywhere else, and that our people exist throughout the Americas, in Peru, in Uruguay, in Argentina, in Colombia, Bolivia, but we are not encouraged to know that we exist in all those places. Our people exist in Mexico, throughout Central America, but we are not encouraged to believe that these are our cousins, our neighbors, our friends, people from our own tribes, perhaps, that we have been socialized away from knowing. And so what I expect and what I believe is at hand is the ability, and I think the film festival is one of the tools for that, to connect our people, the African people, to everybody else in the culture as well. But certainly we have to know ourselves and be free to express our authentic selves, to live inside of our own identity as descendants of Africa and as persons in the diaspora that is huge, that our creativity, our music, our dance, our blues, our literature really, think of, jazz and Afro-Latin jazz, think of reggae out of Jamaica. The music we create is the soundtrack of life on the planet right now. The whole world is experiencing the African heartbeat through the music of salsa, the music of Cuban jazz, the music of reggae. So where does it lead us from your point of view, Franklin, Greg? How do we see the change? How do you see the change that I think is inevitable and imminent right now? Franklin, you first.
Yeah, I think it's very important people remember the history. Right now there is so much, talk about, not, about teaching, about the about African American history and schools. I think it's very important people know the connection, what went on, about the 200 years ago. And so of course, we have to know the history to make sure that we are not, we're not committing the same mistake, we did in the past. And also to have a full understanding about that this is what America is all about. It's not about, whites or black. It's about, about when we come together as a human beings, our blood is red running through our veins. So it's very important, that we fully understand, especially young people, have to fully understand, about the history behind what it is, about this experiment of of America. So with that, about the contribution of immigrants or slaves, it wouldn't be possible, about this American exceptionalism, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important that people fully understand and appreciate and respect, about the contribution of, about the Chinese, of the Italian, the Africans, but all together, but is what makes us Americans, and not just for one group or the other, as a collective, but cohesive group, looking forward, to raise our children, giving opportunities, equal opportunity for everybody. So that's what I feel that is very important: education, and of course, but let's not forget economic, but equality. Economic
Franklin, is to say and to frame this as an American opportunity, is that enough? Because I'm thinking that the challenges really have to be viewed from a different lens, and that if we confine ourselves to what is traditionally perceived as the interest, the line of thinking from America and American exceptionalism, we're going to end up with a guaranteed system that supports what has happened already, which is disenfranchisement. How do we break out of the horror, right? And I think you said it. You have to teach and tell the truth. Tell the truth and tell it, and recognize that everybody has been a part of all that has happened. Go ahead, Franklin.
Yeah, not only have been, but it still is a struggle. And of course, but us always say, in order to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs.
Yeah.
So, which means, but you have to fight, try, to correct, try, to carve a better future for our children and grandchildren. And that takes, but from the beginning of this nation, there's always was, but the struggle through oppression, religious, but the and injustice and so on. So we are living, but the very perilous time, which means, we have, to really, really think hard if we want to protect, but ourselves and this democracy. We have to work very hard, together, not divided, because when you are divided, but the enemy conquers. So we have to really find our common, commonalities and the interests, and try, to find, but the look, but the bright, but star in the north, and be able, to visualize what it is, to live in a world where, a young African American can walk in the streets without fear to being stopped by the police and frisked by the police, or even worse, being shot by the police. Yeah. So that's, to me, is myself personally, I feel enraged that even in the 21st century, African American and also but any people of color, their parents had to teach their children how to behave when they face a situation, the police stop them, be it white policeman or black policeman.
Greg, but I also hear that even in Cuba now, that the young black hip hop generation in particular is unhappy and articulates a sense of being marginalized. When was the last time you were in Cuba, and what's your sense of how successful Cuba has been in eliminating the vestiges of colorism and racial bias, because that was part of the problem. Cuba was affected like everybody else in the world with white supremacist ideology.
Yeah, I've been there 7 times since 2006. I've had the opportunity to meet with hip hop artists from Cuba. In fact, I went down there with American hip hop artists who collaborated with Cuban hip hop artists, and then did a concert, a public concert.
Was that with Maria Issa? Or
no,
not
it was with Pastors for Peace. Okay. And so, of course, what we have, one has to realize that with a blockade, the goal of the blockade is create deprivation and starvation, so that the conditions are deteriorated so bad that the people begin to think. And then on top of that, feed them propaganda through Radio Marti and other streams of social media that are bombarded to Cuba, to think that the problems that are created by the blockade, deprivation and starvation, are the problems from the Cuban government themselves. A government
we're out of time. We got about 1 minute left. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Franklin.
Anyways, it's a constant social issue that they deal with, and it's their solidarity of being united that they're able to handle the campaign, that continued social media campaign that now the United States has taken on to try to disconnect the people.
We got to drop it right there. Go and check out the Minnesota Cuban Film Festival.
Come to the film festival.
We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.